Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderb, and today I'm going to paint this 00 scale cottage that I built a while ago. It has already been primed with Vallejo Black Surface Primer. The first thing I did was to take some Vallejo Mottled Colour Ivory and use it to pick out random roof tiles. This is to create a kind of highlighting when spraying the next colour. I did the same thing on the brick walls. I used ivory because the only white I have is the Model Air white, and it's quite thin, so I would have to do multiple coats, and I didn't really want to do that. You could also use light greys or creamy colours. I then airbrushed the brick walls with Vallejo Model Air Mud Brown. I'm spraying very lightly here to avoid obscuring the ivory coloured bricks. The idea is to create a slight variation in the colour of the bricks rather than having a single solid colour. I'm just using some paper from an artist pad as a shield. It's slightly thicker than regular printer paper, so it works well. Don't forget the chimney. The next thing I did was to use a piece of spongy foam to stipple on some Model Air mahogany. Wipe most of the paint off the foam and then apply it using an up and down motion. Try to avoid dragging the foam across the surface. This step isn't really necessary, but I've seen bricks with this kind of speckly coloration and I quite liked how it looked. Then I sprayed a very light coat of Model Air Light Brown, just to add some slight variation in the colouring. I then sprayed the roof with Vallejo Model Colour Black Grey, thin down enough to spray through the airbrush. I spray it in the same way as the walls to avoid completely obscuring the ivory tiles. I then dry brushed on some Model Colour London Grey. I mostly do this with downward strokes because I figure any discoloration on the roof will be streaked downwards by the rain. I then gave it a light spray with Basalt Grey. I forgot to video that because I'm a numpty, but I'm sure you can imagine what it might look like. Next I started on the doors and windows. I began this with some Model Air Mahogany. This colour is a little thin, so I had to do a few coats. I try to be careful around the edges because redoing the brick colour will be a bit of a pain in the arse. I then did a light dry brushing on the doors and windows using the Flames of War branded Flat Earth. I'm not sure if this is the same as the regular Vallejo version. Getting a little bit of this on the bricks isn't a huge problem. I then start on the chimney. I painted the top cement part of the bricks with Model Colour Basalt Grey. Then I dry brushed the edges of it with Model Air Light Grey. Next I applied Model Colour Red Leather to the chimney stack things. It does look a little bit bright, but they'll be weathered pretty heavily. While that was drying, I returned to the door and applied Model Colour Gold on the hinges and door handle. I had initially wanted to use copper, but my bottle of Model Air Copper had dried out, or had some kind of reaction with the glass bead I used for shaking. I don't know, but I was a bit annoyed. So, I used gold. I did a bit of a messy job, but it was easy enough to fix up with some more Model Air Mahogany. Washes will also help hide some errors. The wash I used on the hinges was Secret Weapons Armor Wash. I went fairly heavy with this because I didn't really want shiny gold hinges. I want them to be dirty and old looking. While I was at it, I put some of the armor wash into the holes in the chimney and streaked some of it down the sides. I then washed the entire model with army painted dark tone, thinned about 50-50 with water. I applied this quite heavily, especially around the doors, windows and chimney, which should look nice and dirty. While the wash was drying, I decided I would try pre-making some grass for the base. I mixed some brown paint with PVA glue, spread it onto some baking paper, and applied static grass. Once it was dry, I was easily able to cut it into strips about the right size that I would need. My reasoning behind this was the static grass applicator that I used would have been difficult to get over such a small area. It would have been blocked by the cottage. Next, it was a simple process of cutting the strips to make way for walkways and then gluing them down using PVA glue. I tried to press the grass pieces down to be as flat as possible, but it didn't sit perfectly flat. While this was drying, I airbrushed some Vallejo Surface Primer lightly onto the chimney to simulate soot. After the glue on the grass was well and truly dried, I carefully took a knife and trimmed it flush with the MDF base. Cutting towards yourself like this is probably a very bad example. To make the paths to the doors, I spread some PVA glue and then sprinkled some model railway ballast onto it. I then neatened it up with the handle of a brush and let it dry. Once it was dry, I knocked off the loose pieces of ballast and then gave it a wash with undiluted army paint to strong tone. Then I diluted the strong tone to about 50-50 mixed with water and applied it roughly on the roof as though it had been streaking down in the rain. Finally, I dry brushed some flat earth onto the rocks of the path. This is what I ended up with. I think it looks pretty good. I haven't applied matte varnish yet, mostly because I don't actually have any on hand, but it looks good enough as it is, I think. I'm not entirely satisfied with the grass. I think the method I used is probably best for just making small clumps and tufts. The long strips go a bit wavy and are a bit annoying to glue down. I think the methods I've used for this are pretty simple and easy, and not particularly time consuming, though of course it does mostly rely on using an airbrush. It's obviously not award-winning showpiece, but if you want some quickly painted buildings that will look good on the table, it works pretty well. For a kit that I bought on impulse, forgot about for who knows how long, and then built for no real reason, I'm quite happy. It's close enough in scale for Flames of War, and that's what I'll be using it for. I hope this video has been helpful. If you've any questions or comments, leave them below. Also, subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks for watching. Farewell.